Hello, I'm Anne Byrn, author of Baking in the American South, and it's a pleasure to be here today and share some recipes from my new book. These recipes, 2 of them I've selected, contain sweet potatoes, and thanks to my friends at Melissa's Produce for shipping me some sweet potatoes to make a wonderful sweet potato cake and a sliced sweet potato pie. You know, and if you look through my book, you'll see that sweet potatoes are really a big ingredient that's used quite often because sweet potatoes have fed the South. They've fed a lot of the country and they've fed a lot of the world. But really, they're rich in nutrients, they have beautiful color, and they add a rich texture to food. And so there's a deep history with the 2 recipes I'm sharing today, and you're going to love them. They're perfect for baking this fall. So the first recipe we're going to make today is George Washington Carver's sliced sweet potato pie. It's a little bit different than a lot of sweet potato pies because you don't cook and mash the sweet potatoes, you slice them. So to do this, I took 3 sweet potatoes, about a pound, and I put them in a saucepan, covered them with water, but I left them in their skin, which is called their jacket. If you look at a lot of old recipes for sweet potato pies, they always call for cooking sweet potatoes in their jacket. And you cook them until they're almost done, about 15 minutes. And then when they're cool enough to handle, and these are just still a little warm, I cut a slit in them to kind of peel off the jacket. It's almost like a zipper on that jacket. And you take the peelings off. You know, sweet potatoes have been a really big part of Southern baking. And there's lots of different varieties of sweet potatoes. So use the ones that you have access to. Sweet potatoes are also called yams, depending on where you live. You know, there is a sort of botanical difference between what is a sweet potato and what is a yam. Sweet potatoes are indigenous to America, and yams indigenous to other parts of the world. But if you go to Louisiana, for example, you know, they don't cook with sweet potatoes, they cook with yam, they make yam bread. So I love that history of them. And sweet potatoes will vary in hue as well. I mean, they can be bright orange, depending on the variety, or they can be much lighter in color. There are white sweet potatoes, and there are purplish sweet potatoes too. So it really depends on the variety, but they all work in this recipe. And then we got potato number 3. So it's really fun just to cut that slit and to peel it off. And depending on how you can handle heat, thinks that, you know, when you cook a lot and you bake a lot, we have you develop what are called asbestos fingers. Nothing bothers you. Okay, so I've got 3 sweet potatoes. Now, like I said, instead of mashing them, I'm going to slice them lengthwise into slices about 1/3 of an inch thick. And there's still some give in there. They're still not all the way cooked, but they're tender enough to slice. And you can see the steams coming right up off these. And I'm going to pop these sweet potatoes right into the pie pastry. So I have put 1 sheet of pie pastry in a 9-inch pie pan, and then the sweet potatoes go in 1 layer. Or, you know, layered on top of each other. It couldn't be easier. Not only do you not have to cook the sweet potatoes as long to make this recipe, but you don't have to mash them. So, really easy. And then we're just going to dump all the ingredients on top. So here's the fun part of making this pie. We started with the sliced sweet potatoes, and I'm going to sprinkle over spices. It's about 1/2 teaspoon of ground allspice, and then dashes of nutmeg, ginger, cloves, but you can cinnamon, whatever you like. Dashes of anything. Clean out your spice cabinet. Dashes of spices, and then we're going to layer on some sugar, about 1/2 cup of sugar. And then some salted butter, using my fingers here. It's about 4 tablespoons of butter. distributed well over the pie. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And then we're going to pour over some molasses. About a 1/4 cup of molasses. Molasses was a sweetener that was used very often in the Deep South. People had, it was the step before sugar was refined into granulated sugar, and so it was available to, more available to people of the South than granulated sugar. And then here's a cup of cream. This is all kind of where the magic happens in this pie. It does all the work for you. You just have to layer on the ingredients. And then for thickening, I've got about a tablespoon of flour that I'm just sprinkling over. That'll thicken things up nicely, so we'll be able to slice the pie when it comes out of the oven. And then I'm going to take our second pie sheet of pastry, and I'm going to lay it on top. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to put some slits in this pie anyway. And I'm going to press down on the edges. Then I'm going to take a paring knife and trim it up. I love this pan. This is a Lodge cast iron pan, pie pan, but you can use any pie pan that you like. I like the old rusticness of it and how it just seems to fit this pie. And then I'm going to take a fork and I'm going to press those two pies, layers of pastry together to seal it in, seal in all the goodies. And the last step is to cut some slits into the crust, top crust, about 6. I've already got a little slit just from my boo-boos. That's okay. And then we'll place the pie in the oven. I had the oven preheated to 350, so the pie's ready to go in the oven. The second recipe we're going to make today is Mrs. Collins' sweet potato cake. And this is a real favorite of mine and our family because Mrs. Collins, it was a dear friend of ours in Nashville. And she grew sweet potatoes in her back garden and had 4 children. And on their birthdays, when the children grew up and they moved across the country, she would bake them a sweet potato cake and ship it to them. And it was their remembrance of growing up in Nashville. So I love this recipe. And it just, what I did was I cooked the sweet potatoes a little bit longer than I did for the pie, and I mashed them. So you need about 2 cups of mashed sweet potatoes for this recipe. And I'm gonna pour it into this great pan. I love this pan. This is a Brilliance pan by Nordic Ware. It's fantastic. And I have brushed it with a little bit of vegetable shortening, or you could use butter, soft butter, and then I dusted it with flour. And it's just, that creates, those 2 ingredients, the fat and the flour, create this perfect, coating for the inside of this pan, and it's gonna release the cake once it's baked. So that's a great tip. And then we're gonna start really by prepping our flour mixture, which is about 2 cups of all-purpose flour, but we're gonna add to that our spices, and this has got, gosh, it's wonderful. You've got cinnamon, a lot of cinnamon in here, and nutmeg, and cloves, and ginger. But vary it to what you like. Add some cardamom. I love cardamom in baked goods. And I'm also adding some salt, baking powder, and baking soda. So this cake is gonna rise. It's got plenty of leavening with the baking powder and baking soda. So it's just so easy to make. And because I know it's gonna rise with that leavening, I'm not worried about creaming the butter or the fat with the sugar, for so many minutes with an electric mixer. And in fact, today I'm gonna make it by hand and show you can make this cake just with a spatula. So I'm starting with sugar in the bowl, and I'm going to add the fat, which is vegetable oil. And you choose what kind of oil you want to use. If you want to use canola oil or grapeseed oil or avocado oil, it's really up to you, but you want a neutral oil. And you're assembling this cake as you would a carrot cake, a spice cake, a prune cake. So it always starts with the sugar and the oil, and it's going to get nice and thick for us. And then we're going to add some vanilla. So I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons. Mix that in, and then we're going to add 4 eggs. And normally, if I made like a pound type cake, I want to add eggs one at a time to make sure that each one is incorporated, and that, you know, I'm aerating the mixture, so I'm getting a lot of air in, which is going to help the rise in the oven. But as I mentioned, because this cake is leavened with both baking powder and baking soda, I'm not so concerned with that. And so I actually kind of cheated there and added 2 eggs at once. And I'm going to do it again because I've got 2 more eggs. But it makes a really nice, thick, starts to be a thick batter. And these are large eggs that I'm just whisking together. So this would be a great cake to make with other members of the family. Friends. You can bake this cake in the bundt, but also in a 9x13 pan and cut it into squares. You can put cream cheese frosting on it. It's a really, really adaptable recipe. So they're nice, that's nice and mixed, and I'm going to then add the sweet potatoes. So again, about 2 cups of mashed sweet potatoes, which is about 1.25 pounds. When you're measuring them, when you're weighing them at the store. Kind of blend those in. And then we add the flour mixture and finally chop pecans, and that is one easy cake. Cakes like this, you know, you could bake in the South, a spice type cake. This might have been, you know, definitely baked in the fall, but also during the holidays, because when you smell it baking, it's pretty incredible. It's really, really fragrant, and it definitely scents up your kitchen in a nice way. So then there's our dry ingredients. And here's another trick, to really disperse the pecans well, and this is about 1/2 cup of finely chopped toasted pecans. I add those sometimes with the flour mixture. I love to do that because then it keeps the pecans nicely distributed. Pecans are a real favorite of mine to bake with. You do not have to add them to this cake. If there's anybody who's got a nut allergy, you can absolutely, you know, forego the pecans. But I think they do add some background music to this cake. And I also call for them to be toasted before you chop them. So what I do is I put the pecan halves in a little baking pan, and while the oven is preheating to 325, then I just let the pecans toast while the oven preheats, and then I pull them out. And really, by the time that the oven is preheated and this cake is made, which is just about now, it's, you know, the pecans are perfectly ready to add to the batter. And now we're just ready to pour it into the pan. And now we're ready to pour the batter in the pan. Couldn't be easier. Like I said, any 10 to 12 inch, 12 cup, I think it is, bundt pan works great. Standard bundt pans. Or a 9x13 pan. You probably could make a layer cake. I have not, but I don't see why you couldn't bake a layer cake. Well, you know, what do you think? What would you like to make out of this recipe? I think it could make wonderful muffins. I think you could definitely make muffins out of this batter. Bake them at a little higher temperature, about 375. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed watching me make the Mrs. Collins sweet potato cake and George Washington Carver's sliced sweet potato pies. Both recipes from my new book, Baking in the American South. I want to thank everyone at Melissa's Produce for shipping me all those beautiful sweet potatoes. I have loved working with them. Certainly sweet potatoes are an inspiration for fall baking, and I hope you enjoy both of these recipes.